All right, we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining us today for the monthly Cultural Navigator webinar. Today's topic is cultural competence, and we add an equation today around cultural competence, which includes the Cultural Navigator and the Balanced Scorecard Perspective. So let's take a look at who's joining us today on our panel. We have quite a team joining us today. So hello, my name is Lynn Putz. I'm the Director of Solutions, and there on the left of your screen. Our presenters today, the team is led by Bettina Neidhardt, and she is our client strategy consultant. She's based in Europe. We also have, as support to the presentation, David Potts, who's the Director of Global Strategy Implementation for Berlitz. We're really happy to have both of them today talk about the Balanced Scorecard and how it can help in supporting your Cultural Navigator implementation. And Louisa Ajami, who's the content editor for our online solutions department here that supports the Cultural Navigator, she's going to help us navigate through the Cultural Navigator to understand how that how this can be implemented with the Cultural Navigator and the Balanced Scorecard Perspective. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started, if I could. In order to reduce background noise, we're going to keep all participants muted. So in other words, in order to be involved in today's session, which we hope you are, please use the question box on your right side panel. We'll reserve approximately 30 minutes at the end for a moderated question and answer session. And today's session will be recorded, and after the webinar, we'll share the link with you. When we switch presenters, you might see a pause in the presentation. Please stick with us as we transition. All right, so let's get started with a first polling question. I'd like to find out who's on the line with us today. We have quite a number of people, so please let us know if your role is in talent management, organizational development, training, business line leader, or other. And if you choose other, go ahead and use the question box to let us know what role you do play in your organization. So let's see what the results are. Lakeisha? All right. Oh, wow. Okay, so we have business line leaders on the line, and we have others. So we have 80% other. So let's take a look at that in a little bit while our presenters are presenting, and we'll report back to you on who's actually on the line with us today. So thanks for joining us. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to Bettina, who's going to walk us through the Cultural Navigator usage data and scorecard implementation. So take it away, Bettina.
Great, thank you very much, Lynn, and welcome to our webinar on exploring ways to support cultural initiative implementation by looking at specific data that is related to the Cultural Navigator usage and scorecard alignment. My name is Bettina Neidhardt, and my colleagues Louisa, David, and Lynn look forward to exploring this topic in detail with you today. We'd like to look at key features of the Cultural Navigator with you, specifically as related to usage data that we can analyze. And let's explore some options for including some of the usage data in a scorecard-based strategic approach. So I'd like to actually start with a brief quote by Winston Churchill. However beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the results. That's a no-brainer, of course, when it comes to strategy implementation. Naturally, we need to look at the results of every strategy or strategic initiative that we are implementing. And a cultural competence or cultural agility initiative is high impact opportunity, a very high impact opportunity to influence many business areas in an organization. However, I think we would all agree that measuring the success of an initiative that focuses particularly on soft skills is not always easy. And it is certainly still one of the most challenging topics in employee learning and growth. So let's look at today the key features of the Cultural Navigator Learning Platform. The monthly activity snapshot, which displays specific usage data for the Cultural Navigator. in this case using what we call a monthly activity snapshot. And if we can actually go back to the previous slide. Let's see, I think we just jumped there. So, you know, the second bullet point, the monthly activity snapshot, and then thirdly, linking this Cultural Navigator usage data to measures and targets in a scorecard type of approach and focusing on the different perspectives. So let's first take a look, though, before we get into that, at the key features in the Cultural Navigator and relate them to the usage data that we're going to explore. And for that initial exploration and demo of the key features, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Louisa Ajami.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Bettina. I'm looking forward to showing you the features of the Cultural Navigator that link directly to the monthly activity snapshot report. So now you should all be able to see my screen. The Cultural Navigator learning platform provides comprehensive cultural and business information designed to increase your competitive advantage in our global business environment today. It offers a unique learning experience that you can personalize based on your business interests, and it can be customized to support many of your organization's initiatives. When first creating our Cultural Navigator account, we identify our function, our department, and our location. This flows into the overall data that helps us understand where the user population overall is located and highlights the diversity of employees who are coming together on the cultural platform. Under Settings up here, I can choose one of 12 languages for the Cultural Orientations Indicator Assessment, which we will come to now. One of the most important components of the Cultural Navigator learning platform is the COI, our core tool to identify our individual cultural profile and preferences. Before we can understand group dynamics within cultural diversity and address specific gaps and challenges, we need to understand our own cultural profile. The COI, which stands for Cultural Orientations Indicator, helps us understand our cultural preferences and therefore our role in communication and collaboration. So let's just briefly look at the individual COI report in more detail now. Once you've taken your COI assessment in the Cultural Navigator, the report is available to you on your homepage in the language that you've chosen. The first click on the wheel offers a summary overview of the report. Here you can see my COI summary report indicated in 3 cultural dimensions. These are the 3 dimensions in the Cultural Orientations model: interaction style here on the left in blue, thinking style in the middle in green, and sense of self on the right in orange. Each dimension contains several cultural orientations that are laid out on a continuum. In the individual COI report, the asterisk or the star indicates the strength of your orientation in that continuum. 1 star shows a strong preference, and 2 stars shows a very strong preference. For a deeper understanding of our cultural preferences, we now click on the View Report icon on the top right of this pop-up window, which will lead us to the detailed debrief of the assessment. The online debrief of the assessment caters to various learning preferences of adult learners. For example, at the top here is a summary list of those of us who prefer a broad outline initially, or those who prefer a broad outline initially. This is for them. For example, here I can see that I have a fluid orientation or preference when it comes to time, and I can see my other preferences within this dimension. If I scroll down, I can view a visual representation of the full continuum. For example, the fixed and fluid preference. When I click on the orientation right here in blue, I'm led to a more detailed debrief. I can click on the audio debrief here on the left, or on a brief written description to find out more detail about this particular preference. Then I can go to challenges. And this is very valuable as it offers bullet-style information regarding the potential challenges when interacting with people or others who have the same preferences or different preferences. And it gives highly practical tips on how I can prepare myself better for communication and interaction success. The Cultural Navigator also offers scenarios to test our knowledge and links to additional resources that you can pursue. I can also download my full COI report for use offline by clicking on the icon located on the right-hand side. I can download, save, and print a hard copy of my full report. Now back to the home page for now. Before we move on to usage and scorecard perspectives, I'd briefly like to draw your attention to the following features. Learning paths, here in the center of the home page. Interests, up here on the top, are customizable for each user's. The country guide section, right here on the upper right, and the network section. This includes my colleagues, teams, communities, and subject matter experts right here. We'll come back to these features, but for now I'd like to return to Bettina Neidhardt and David Potts, who will explore linking monthly activity snapshot usage data to scorecard perspectives.
Great. Thank you very much, Louisa, for this review of the key features in the Cultural Navigator, which, by the way, you can also access on the www.culturalnavigator.com website. There's a detailed tour that you can explore. So let's take a look now at the monthly activity snapshot for the Cultural Navigator. And here's a sample. And we will briefly go through the report and then look more deeply into each of those aspects a little later. And by the way, the report is a one-page document. We're now looking at the top half of this document. And what we can see here is on the left, under top enrollments, so we can see enrollment status at the top, we can see the total logins, and of course on the right side, the average login per user. Under the top enrollments by function, just below enrollments, we can see that the top 3 are coming, for example, from marketing, sales, and HR. And interesting to see is also that the top locations that are represented are Tokyo, Toronto, and Princeton. So moving right along, we can see the COI completion status at the bottom. And in this case, actually if we can go back to the last slide, the previous slide, please. Thank you. So the COI status here that we just mentioned, and as it was explained by Louisa in detail, here we can see how many users have completed the individual dimensions of the assessment, the 3 dimensions that Louisa highlighted. And we can also see on the right side the data indicating the language that users have chosen for their COI assessment, in this case the majority English and Japanese. So now looking at the next slide, at the bottom part of the activity snapshot, again, which is usually one document, here we can see what's very interesting is the top 5 enrolled learning paths that our users in the organization have selected, and on the right side the top 5 selected interests. Louisa was pointing those out earlier. Those were the bubbles, the circles on the Cultural Navigator homepage. And remember that these interest areas are customizable for each user. We can then identify the top 5 visited countries that our users have frequented on the left side. And in order to access, they can access the top 5 countries in order to access information on both the business information as well as the cultural preference information or cultural norms for currently over 100 countries. And by the way, users can also compare their preferences, their cultural preferences, to 57 countries currently, where we provide proprietary research data on country cultural norms. And last but not least, also the network usage data. On the right side here we can see the number of connections made by each user. So this is where our users connect with each other in order to be able to compare their cultural preference results. We can also see the number of teams, in this case 25, the number of teams that have been created by users, and where they have invited colleagues in order to, for example, look at project teams, look at functional teams or other types of teams, and specifically looking at the distribution of their cultural preferences within those particular teams. And very much at the bottom we can see the number of users that have signed up for following our subject matter experts that we have on the Cultural Navigator, who provide current thought leadership regularly, pretty much by posting articles and practical tips. So that was a brief overview of the monthly activity snapshot, and together with my colleague David Potts, we will now explore the combination of the usage data in the snapshot that we just looked at in alignment with scorecard perspectives. So just for a brief review of the scorecard approach, the balanced scorecard is a strategic planning and management system that is used extensively in business and industry, in government and nonprofit organizations worldwide to align business activities to the vision and the strategy of the organization, and to improve internal and external communications, and to monitor organization performance against strategic goals. It was originated by Dr. Robert Kaplan from Harvard Business School and David Norton as a performance measurement framework that added strategic non-financial performance measures to the traditional financial metrics to give managers and executives really a more balanced view of organizational performance. And with regards to perspectives, which is really what we're going to be looking at today, the balanced scorecard suggests that we view the organization from 4 perspectives, and that we develop metrics, collect data, and analyze it relative to each of these perspectives. So David, could you tell us a few words about scorecard perspectives?
Sure, Bettina, and hello everyone. Okay, so here let's take a look at a sample strategy map. And if we think of this in terms of a map, and if you think of your financial objectives at the top there as your final destination on this map, the question is, what is the surest path to getting there? And in my experience, the most effective, most sustainable way is to balance the traditional financial area of focus with 3 key non-financial perspectives of customer satisfaction, your internal business processes, and your organization's ability to learn, grow, and to innovate. This then allows you to map your strategies across these 4 perspectives, and if you start with learning and growth as your starting point and work your way up, you can see this cause and effect relationship between the perspectives, and particularly how the various strategies are linked together in a way that enables and guides you to your financial success. And just before we go to the next slide, Bettina, I think it's always interesting to see on such maps like this at the learning and growth level, organizational culture as a key component of your learning and growth perspective. And to me, of course, this is where the CN can play a critical role, which we'll talk a little bit about later.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that overview. Actually, this is quite a complex strategy map. They can be very complex, as we know. But for today's exploration purpose, with regards to cultural initiatives, let's also look at an example of very simple strategy maps. One famous one is the Southwest Airlines strategy map on the left. Here we can easily refer to the 4 perspectives. Much more easily identified. David, can you speak briefly to the cause and effect relationship, again, between the 4 perspectives in this case?
Sure, happy to elaborate. You know, and I love this example for its powerful simplicity. So again, if you look at Southwest strategy map here as a map, each bubble here on the map represents a strategic objective within a given perspective. And each one of those bubbles is the answer to one of 4 key questions. So working backwards from our financial destination, to satisfy our shareholders, what financial objectives must we accomplish? The second question, moving on down, is to achieve our financial objectives, how do we want our customers to perceive us? Continuing on down, to satisfy our customers and our shareholders, in which internal business processes must we excel? And at the foundation, to achieve all of our strategic goals, what must we learn and how must we innovate? And I think this is important both as individual employees and as the organization as a whole. So how did Southwest answer these questions? Well, you can see if we start from organizational capabilities as the foundation and go up. they determined that by establishing world-class teamwork, we'll be in a position to successfully implement faster ground turnaround, which in turn will positively impact our target customers' demands for on-time flights, low fares, which as a consequence will result in maximizing our profitability through lower costs and increased revenue. Very straightforward. For me, I think this really captures the essence of the balanced scorecard approach, which is success from a financial perspective is really a consequence of how successful and how much attention you give to the other non-financial perspectives, as well as your ability to measure that success with specific KPIs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and this is really a great and very simplified balanced scorecard that very clearly describes. It's easy to see the cause and effect relationship, really, and of course organizational capabilities, world-class teamwork, that very much links into the Cultural Navigator, as you mentioned before as well. So thanks for that. That is very insightful. Let's continue then to explore the connection between the perspectives and a cultural initiative by using the monthly activity snapshot data. But first, actually before we go to that, let's have a quick poll question for our audience. So please let us know, what is your key challenge around measuring success of your cultural initiative? The biggest challenge is, number 1, lack of strategy definition in the organization. Number 2, lack of alignment. Number 3, unsure actually about how to measure success. Number 4, we have no challenges at this time, or other. So please go ahead and vote. And if you do say other, then do let us know in the chat box what that possibly is. Oh, we have no other. Okay. I love that 17% have no challenges at this time. I would love to talk to you. That's fantastic. And of course, unsure about how to measure success. That's very common. Lack of strategy definition and lack of strategic alignment. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And it looks like we still have quite a bit of work ahead. So let's see if maybe we can have some ideas for thought today. Let's explore some practical ways to connect the data again in the monthly activity snapshot with the perspectives, and even look at potential key performance indicators, measures, and targets. So, for example, David, if we look at COI completion status here on this particular snapshot, we can see that 85% of users have completed the COI, all 3 dimensions. So if our completion target number, for example, is 80%, then we have exceeded our expectations. So maybe at the beginning of the initiative when we were launching it, then we have exceeded our expectations. And then we can review our next target that we would set for this particular category, which, could be 90 or just, moving on a little bit bolder. Let's aim for 100%. So
Exactly. And in the same way, if you're targeting 10 logins per user on average, say, then according to our snapshot here, we've definitely exceeded that expectation, and it's probably time for us to sit down and with the team and review realistic expectations moving forward.
Exactly. It'll be a nice situation to be in, that's for sure. So let's look next then at the top 5 selective interests. We have taken these out of the snapshot here and highlighted those. This is an interesting, actually, lead indicator. The top 5 selected interests on the bottom right. This provides me with the information I need to know regarding what are the actual interests of our users in our organization. And the question is, do these interests differ from what we expected originally?
Yes, Bettina. I mean, in this way, this is a very powerful KPI because we can establish with this information a benchmark for future or additional support initiatives that our employees may need in order to execute as a team successfully. We can also use this as a gap analysis, indicating, to what degree are we aligned with our employees' interests vis-a-vis our business strategies.
Absolutely, yep. And actually in this area, we can also see, for example, that one of the top 2 selected interests relates to leading a global team. So knowing this is a really great opportunity to take this data and meet with the team leaders, for example, to see whether we are actually doing enough to support them in their efforts to lead either their virtual or diverse global teams successfully, or even their local teams. This could be of importance when we relate it to a specific initiative. So, for example, such as launching a new product in an international market. So let's actually move on and look at network usage. For example, it is here critically important really for our organization that a large, if it is important for our organization that a large number of teams is established to improve cross-border understanding and collaboration, then let's say we had set our goal as, we expect about 45 teams to be established within the first launch phase. And here we see 25. So this tells us that we still have quite a bit of work to do with regards to potential education for our users on either the value and the benefit of team creation, so maybe this is not quite clear yet, both for the individuals as well as groups in the organization, or it could be simply the process of team creation. And we would have to go back and review the brief step-by-step process on how to set up a team. That may do the trick actually. And let's now move to an exploration of what this could look like if we were to use this data that we just looked at to integrate with our scorecard approach and our strategic perspectives. So, I don't know, David,
so looking at this, sure. If we look at this in terms of our map, our guide to achieving our financial objectives, and if we've identified one of those objectives to be a successful product launch in one of our target markets in Japan, working our way up from the learning and growth perspective, we can see how the CN can play a role in a couple ways. Two ways that I see is CN as information platform, for example, providing HR teams globally with cultural knowledge and skills to improve employee support and to more effectively impact talent development. And also the CN as a learning platform, focusing on skill building, for example, style shifting and becoming more aware of cultural differences of, one, your cultural perspective from yourself and cultural perspectives versus other employees, cultural perspectives working with external customers, all of which then bubbles up into the internal process perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really about helping, in this case, for example, an HR team, impact talent development, become more skilled and at understanding the many different ways that diverse employee groups have to be supported, which is really digging deep under the surface. So moving from that into the internal process, so how could, for example, Cultural Navigator Solutions or the Cultural Navigator as a learning platform in this case, feed back into optimizing internal process and contribute to that? So, for example, providing easy access to global cultural knowledge, business skills to sales teams as one example. It could be any other team, of course. It could be IT team. It could be human resources. It could be really any functional department. Providing easy access, a comprehensive cultural platform that's accessible 24/7 to every employee around the globe with quality information, at the really touch of a button. So instead of us having to go out and gathering cultural business and skill information in many different places, everything is easily accessible in one platform. It's all in one place. This can significantly actually impact efficiency and effectiveness as related to internal process, our internal business processes.
Exactly, and having improved team interactions through increased awareness of cultural preferences and better skills to navigate cultural differences, this can be extended then to the customer perspective. And I think for me a very relevant objective here is to have culturally competent interactions with your external customers. Case in point, very easy, classic example is just the concept of fixed versus fluid time preferences. An awareness of this, an appreciation of it, and going into situations where you're not going to be offended because a particular culture. For example, if I'm from Brazil and I'm working with Japanese colleagues, they may take a not such a favorable look of showing up sort of late to an event, whereas for me, being in the moment and having a relationship with the customer and not being tied to the clock is the most important thing. But if we can approach our target market with an awareness and the ability to style shift, this is obviously going to lead us to laying the groundwork for successful engagement of the Japanese market, which then leads as a consequence to financial success.
Yeah, absolutely. Can very much relate to that example. Thank you. Good. So let's get more specific now with measurable data, and let's explore the data as related to, for example, the learning and growth perspective, and let's look at specific KPIs, key performance indicators. So here we have some examples. Let's just look at the top 3 right now. We have active Cultural Navigator enrollments, the average login per user, and the COI completion. The first 2 are being at the top of the monthly activity snapshot, and here the specific measure would be, for example, the number of enrollments, and on the right side we would have status versus status or actuals versus our target. So if we have, let's say, in our company acquired a license for 200 people, then we have reached our target. You know, all 200 licenses have been activated, and we can be satisfied with the result. Then we look at the average login per user. Our expectation in this case had been, and our target had been 5 logins on average per user, and the status in the actuals is actually 6. So again, we've exceeded our expectation. When we look at the COI completion, we can look at the percentage completed, as you saw previously in the activity snapshot. If we set our target you know, at the beginning of the launch, let's say at 90%, we really would have liked, for example, 90% of the active users to have their COI assessment completed within a certain time period, and our actual is 44%. So we've got some work to do ahead of us. So let's take a look at the next slide, and this actually links to what we were just talking about, again, visualizing where do we find that data that we just looked at in the monthly activity snapshot. And then let's go to additional examples. Let's take a look at the next slide. And here, you know, just as one example, a top priority area for our organization, for example, is Brazil. If we're launching, let's say, a new product or a new initiative in the Brazilian market, and here we want to look at quite a bit of different data. Let's say our target has been set at 100% for our users to go to all areas in the Cultural Navigator that relate to specifically Brazil. And if we take a look at the next slide, you can actually see there that well, working with Brazil, which is one of the currently 18 learning paths available for country-specific information, you can see that 50% of our users have actually enrolled in the learning path. So again, we may need additional support. And the top 5 selected interests, we can see, okay, great, Brazil is at the top of that list. So I guess we are doing a good job on that. What do you think, David?
Yes, yes, and the leading a global team interest may be related to this. So here is again a good opportunity to follow up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and so you know, this has been just a quick look at this. Hopefully this information will have provided you just an initial idea and some thoughts in the direction of usage or activity data, and linked to a scorecard approach to supporting successful initiative implementation of a cultural awareness or a cultural agility initiative. Let's just sum up the most important steps that we should consider to support implementation of our strategic initiative. So obviously, you know, we start with the monthly activity snapshot and choose key data. That could be different data depending on what your focus is and how it's related to your specific initiative. We should then review and define the measures and targets with stakeholders. We definitely need to agree on specific measures that we are going to include in a strategy map. And of course, we always need to set targets and then on a monthly basis review them against the MASD monthly activity snapshot. One of the things we definitely need to do is keep it simple. So really just three things. Always review. Review this on a monthly basis. Always compare targets versus actuals, and always explore, based on the findings, what implementation support options should we take in order to make sure all of our employees are supported optimally in terms of being able to use the online learning platform. So actually now we would like to go back to my colleague Louisa, and Louisa will give us a quick tour of the key features that link to the monthly activities snapshot data as we actually just explored it, just to recap and make sure that we have the relevant areas covered that we looked at in terms of data.
Great. Hello. Thank you, Bettina and David. So let me point out the additional specific features on the Cultural Navigator that we've explored on the monthly activity snapshot and usage data in more detail. One of the key lead indicators that we looked at was the interest area, which is customizable by each user. You find this right here at the top of the home page. By clicking on the edit function, you can easily remove, add, or rearrange the interest areas you have chosen. In the center of the home page here, you see the learning paths. In this case, it shows the top 3 that I've been working on. By clicking on View All, I'll be able to see all of the learning paths that are available to me. Here I already have one open right here. This completion tracking at the top of each learning path page is a good way for me to see the status, what I've completed, which steps I've completed, which I have yet to do. Because you can stop working on a learning path and then pick up later where you left off, and this will show you exactly how much you've completed at the time when you re-enter it. This is the area where the data is represented that flows into the top 5 enrolled learning paths on the monthly activity snapshot. In the top right of all of the pages on this tab, I find the country guides. Just a quick look for you here. I have the China country guide open. I can find a wealth of information on each country available in the Cultural Navigator, including the business data here and the cultural norms up here. You can see the cultural norms for China there, and the full report is available by clicking on this button on the top right of the dialog box. This is represented in the monthly activity snapshot by the top 5 visited countries. Very importantly as well, up here at the top of the page, I can see the network options I have available that Bettina addressed. I have colleague connections represented in the monthly activity snapshot by the number of connections made. The teams is represented by the number of teams created. And subject matter experts, this area links to the number of users following experts. This concludes part 2 of our look at the Cultural Navigator learning platform. Now let's go back to another polling question for you.
Great, thank you, Louisa. So let's have another polling question. What is the most relevant and helpful for me or for you to improve my own implementation efforts? So from some of the things that you've seen today, is it the monthly activity snapshot? Would it be specific numbers only that you saw in the monthly activity snapshot? Is it adopting a scorecard approach to measuring cultural success, or tracking your learning path progress on the Cultural Navigator directly, which is also an option, or is it other? So just let us know what you think. Okay, adopting a scorecard approach, great. Happy to see that. And of course, tracking progress, yes. And that also can link very nicely into specific KPIs. So thank you for that. Great to see that these tools, resources, and this information is valuable. Now, actually, I would like to hand over to my colleague, Lynn Putz, to wrap up today's session with the additional really valuable information for you.
Thanks, Bettina. Thank you, David, and Louisa as well. What a great presentation and very technically sound. I think a lot of our clients are looking for specific ways to measure usage and be able to track, based on objectives and criteria that are measurable. So thank you for that. So 2 quick participant questions. First is, what is the most exciting element of the Cultural Navigator for you? Is it the overall look, the ease of navigation, the customizable user interface, or the cultural orientations indicator, or the COI, which is the assessment? And the last is the collaborative learning tools. So just give us an idea of what's most engaging for you. Okay, so the COI by 2/3, and the collaborative learning tools take up 1/3. Great, thank you so much for that. Let's go to question number 5, which is, what are the biggest challenges you have faced or will face in launching the tool in your organization? Perhaps having marketing materials, getting the message out, driving usage, or answering questions about the tool. If you have other, go ahead and type that into the question box for us. Let's see what is the results. All right, so driving usage continues to be the #1 response from our participants in this series of webinars that now have extended a 1.5 years. We have been conducting this webinar, and each time the driving usage of the Cultural Navigator is the #1 concern. This is one of the great reasons we've taken it to the balanced scorecard level as well. So thank you again, Bettina and David, for walking us through that. All right, so let's wrap up the session with a couple of reminders. Just an overall perspective on the Cultural Navigator. We really built it with 4 different pillars in mind. One is that it's personal. It's customizable to the individual user based on their interest and measures completed activities at the individual level. Second is that it is collaborative, and we provide opportunities for individuals to connect and to share knowledge and transfer knowledge between themselves so they can engage in new learning activities as well. The third element is that it's relevant and adapted for every organization. So it is customizable to the organizational level, including comparisons of the COI across the entire organization, broken out by function and geography. So that's pretty important as well. And then the fourth element is that it's representative of all of our products. So it fits very nicely with a before and after training program as a pre-work and then as post-work. It also it can be incorporated in multiple ways for specific client-initiated education and learning opportunities. All right, so those are the 4 key pillars of the Cultural Navigator. I'd like to remind you about the upcoming webinars that are scheduled. In November, we have a focus on the Strategic Performance Framework, which is the new Cultural Orientations Guide that we published this year. I'll be joined by Karen Walsh and Jörg Schmitz, who will be presenting the Cultural Orientations Guide and giving you an idea of what's contained inside of the new book. So looking forward to that. So thank you so much for coming. We have just a couple of last reminders for you. And that is to join us for our next session and to continue to utilize the Cultural Navigator. If you have any questions about the balanced scorecard approach, we would love to have you stay on. Type those questions into the chat box, and until next time, thanks so much for joining. We will see you soon.